but instead, she placed a portable radio on the counter. This little radio came from the days when they boasted about the number of transistors inside on the case. It was completely wrapped in dirty white medical tape. The woman looked at me and asked, "Can you fix this?" Slowly, I unwrapped the medical tape, peeling away the layers until the back cover of the radio fell off, accompanied by a cloud of red dust. The interior of the radio was half eaten away by battery leakage and corrosion. I looked at the radio. I looked at the old woman. I looked back at the radio. I reached behind me, where the expensive alkaline batteries were hanging like prescription medication, and removed a gleaming 9-volt cell from its gold blister pack. Then I pulled a brand new transistor radio from a box, installed the alkaline, and helped the lady find her favorite station. No money changed hands. She left the store without saying a word. Awesome things are kind of like that. Bach offered his students very specific insight into the source of awe. In addition to BACH, 2 other sets of initials are also associated with Bach's music. These initials are not hidden in the notes. Instead, they're scrawled right across the top of the manuscript for the whole world to see. The initials are SDG and JJ. SDG stands for the Latin phrase Soli Deo Gloria, to the glory of God alone. JJ stands for Jesu Juva, help me, Jesus. Bach wrote all of his great masterpieces sub specie aeternitatis, under the aspect of eternity. He did not compose only to please his sponsors or to win the approval of an audience. His work was his worship. Bach once wrote, "Music should have no other end and aim than the glory of God and the recreation of the soul. Where this is not kept in mind, there is no true music, but only an infernal clamor and ranting." The name of the power that moves you is not important. What is important is that you are moved. Awe is the foundation of religion. No other motivation can free you from the limits of personal achievement. Nothing else can teach you the art of flight. Computer games are barely 40 years old. Only a few words in our basic vocabulary have been established. A whole dictionary is waiting to be coined. The slate is clean. Someday soon, perhaps even in our lifetime, a game design will appear that will flash across our culture like lightning. It will be easy to recognize. It will be generous, giddy with exuberant inventiveness. Scholars will pick it apart for decades, perhaps centuries. It will be something wonderful, something terrifying, something awful. A few years ago, I was invited to speak at a conference in London. My wife joined me, and we took a day off for some sightseeing. We decided to visit England's second biggest tourist attraction, Stratford-upon-Avon. It was cold and rainy when our train arrived. Luckily, most of the attractions are just a short walk from the station. We visited Shakespeare's birthplace, a charming old house along the main street, which attracts millions of pilgrims every year, despite the complete lack of any evidence that Shakespeare was born there or even lived anywhere near it. We went past the school where Shakespeare learned to read and write, although no documents exist to prove his attendance. We visited Anne Hathaway's cottage, the rustic country farm where his wife spent her childhood, although no record shows anyone by that name ever having lived there. Finally, we came to the one location undeniably associated with Shakespeare, Trinity Parish Church, on the banks of the River Avon, where a man by that name is buried. This beautiful church is approached by a long walkway between rows of ancient gravestones, shaded by tall trees. The entrance door is surprisingly tiny. No cameras are allowed inside. The interior is dark and quiet. Despite the presence of busloads of tourists, the atmosphere is hushed and respectful. A few people are seated in the pews, deep in prayer. An aisle leads up the center of the church. The left side of the altar is brightly illuminated. On the wall above is a famous bust of the bard, quill in hand, gazing serenely at the crowd of pilgrims. On the floor beneath, surrounded by bouquets of flowers, at the very spot where Delia Bacon lost her mind, the gravestone of William Shakespeare bears this dire warning. Good friend, for Jesus' sake, forbear to dig the dust enclosed here. Blessed be the man who spares these stones, and cursed be he that moves my bones. Every year, 3 million pilgrims arrive from every nation on earth to approach this stone and consider the likeness of a man whose body of work can only be described as awesome. By contrast, the right side of the altar is dark and featureless. Nobody of any consequence is buried there. The only point of interest is a wooden case of simple design, carved of dark oak. Inside the case, sealed beneath a thick sheet of glass, lies a large open book. A plaque on the case identifies this book as a first edition of the King James Bible, published in 1611, when Shakespeare was 46. Not many pilgrims visit this side of the altar. Most of those that do simply glance at the book, read the plaque, and move along. A few, more observant, note that the Bible happens to be opened to a page in the Old Testament, the book of Psalms, chapter 46. No explanation is given for this particular choice of pages. For the initiated, none is necessary. If you are of inquisitive bent, if you are intrigued by English history and literature, if you value your peace of mind, cover your ears now. In the year 1900, a scholar noticed something about the King James translation of Psalm 46. Something terrifying, something wonderful. The 46th word from the beginning of Psalm 46 is shake. The 46th word from the end is spear. There are only 2 possibilities here. Either this is the finest coincidence ever recorded in the history of world literature, or it is not. The Earth revolves around only one sun. and has only one moon. The moon happens to be 400 times smaller than the sun. The sun happens to be 400 times farther away. And the apparent paths of the moon and sun in our sky happen to intersect exactly twice every month. Which means that every now and then, at long yet precisely predictable intervals, the lunar disk slips across the face of the sun and just barely conceals it for a few wonderful, terrible minutes. A fine coincidence, no? In June of 1977, a little man with divergent eyes and a talent for mischief ascended a hilltop in the British village of Ampthill. At the summit of this hill is a tall, slender cross, a memorial to Catherine of Aragon, the first wife of Henry VIII. The sun, high in the south, cast the shadow of the cross upon the grassy hillside.
Bonsoir.
At exactly 12 noon, the man removed from his pocket a bar magnet.
On attend.
He turned the magnet so its north pole was facing south.
Bonsoir, j'espère que vous allez bien.
Buried it under the shadow of the cross.
Attends, ça doit être fini.
Later, a few hours
Normalement, en 2 minutes, c'est
before
fini.
the publication of his first book, the man returned.
Donc c'était pas 1h08 comme disait Tony, c'était 58 minutes.
In the dead of night. He used a compass to
Vous l'avez vu sur la
locate
Solus.
the magnet he had buried. In that same place, he dug a hole in the ground and placed inside a ceramic container inscribed with the following words: I am the keeper of the jewel of
Salut, Kim.
masquerade,
Ça va?
which lies waiting safe inside me. You
C'est fait. Enfin. Oh putain, c'est bon, on a terminé. Ça y est, c'est bon, j'ai tout. C'est voilà. Et tout ça pourquoi? Et il m'en a faire quoi pour terminer? Parce que comment il s'appelle? Tony était là. Oh, tu vas voir les crédits? Bah ils sont où les crédits maintenant? J'aime pas les crédits. Fatigué mais ça va et toi? Ça va, ça va, ça va. La fin secrète. C'est... Ah non. C'est pas ça. Il faut juste retourner au truc là? Attends, je vais voir la soluce. Ending one. Bah, y a que 2 fins en fait, hein. Y a pas de crédit ou quoi, hein. Je sais pas ce qu'il m'a raconté. D'ailleurs, non, ce n'est pas 1h08. Il m'a dit de la merde. C'est 58 minutes. Comme ce que j'avais vu sur le. Sur le. La soluce. Ok. Bah, c'est tout, il se passe rien. Super, c'est pour ça. Ça me donne pas. Bah, ouais. Ouais. Un peu de nuit. Oh merde. C'est ma playlist ça. Ouais, c'est pas rien, y a pas de crédit ou quoi. Je sais pas ce que m'a dit Tony, mais y a rien du tout. Il est juste. Regarde en fait. C'est tout. C'est fini. Donc là le seul moyen de vraiment finir totalement, c'est de retourner retourner là-bas là. Attends, on va juste voir. Donc je vais repasser comme ça vite fait. Capture audio The Witness. Et capture de jeu The Witness. Voilà, c'est bon. Et maintenant. Bref, bah voilà, c'est tout. 123, 135 plus 6. Je vais voir si c'est bien le bon nombre. Ça va 3, 135, 6. Ouais, c'est. Ouais, voilà. Du coup, j'ai terminé. Bon. Alors. Attends, petite quand même, petite débrief quand même sur le jeu. Maintenant que c'est terminé. J'ai lancé un record, hein. Le record il a duré 58 minutes. Il est toujours en cours, c'est à 1 heure là. Ouais. Alors comment dire, autant tout ce qui était tableau et tout c'est sympa, autant les chemins franchement casse les couilles. J'en peux plus. Vraiment c'est pas possible ça. C'était beaucoup trop chiant. Ça vraiment ça m'a saoulé.